Okay, the cost budgeting tools here for actually preparing the budget themselves involve cost aggregation, reserve analysis, and so on. So basically, we're going to roll up the costs as described in the work breakdown structure. We can roll them up to what we call control points, and these are budgetary control points, or then to the project as a whole. And the organization will tell us when to do that sort of thing. If there are parametric or analogous estimates from previous work, just use and notate them here. And these are most reliable when the historical numbers are close to what we've been doing, and we can easily quantify the model parameters. If the models are scalable, if they're interpolative, that is, if we can interpolate between known data points, these are pretty accurate. Extrapolation is extremely dangerous. The funding limit reconciliation, if the funding is fixed on a regular basis, only so many dollars flow per month, you may have to spread the work out to keep the budget under those limits. The technical term for this is funding limit reconciliation, which means we have to slow the work down because we don't have money to pay for it. The outputs from determined budget are cost baseline, which is going to be the cost baseline for the entire project, and funding requirements and project management update. The cost baseline, this is the time-phase budget that's used for earned value control, as we'll see. We have to estimate every cost that we can possibly think of. And if there are guidelines that we have to follow, well, please follow those guidelines. Typically, the time-based budget will be an S-based curve or a cumulative spending of the money as we go through the project. There can be many sub-cost baselines in large projects for contractors and outsourced work and that sort of thing. Now, the Charter of Accounts is, again, an accounting term that refers to the structure by which we group expenses. So 41 are travel expenses, 42 are cab expenses, that sort of thing. It can be done on a per phase basis. It can be done on the step developmental process. Now, these are defined by the accountants and the bean counters, but it's important that we follow them, of course. The reserve analysis, we must calculate the management reserves we're going to ask for. This is not part of the project cost baseline, but it's included in the budget, just so we know some sort of indication of how much might be needed. We don't use that in earned value calculations, and in fact, the project manager has to get approval to get at these funds from the pointy-haired boss, and likely up to a vice president. We've got to consider risk at this point, too, that if RIS all of a sudden raise their hoary little heads, it can have a significant impact on the actual budget itself. If we take a look then finally at the budget components, and this is taken from the PMBOK, over at the far right-hand side, we have the activity cost estimates that we started out with, plus a contingency reserve. And this is basically the work plan estimates here with a little bit of buffer for the activities. Then we add contingency reserve for the project as a whole. And remember, this can be as high as 30%. Then this is a control accounts for major components of the budget. And then finally, the cost baseline plus the management reserve will be the final budget over on the far left-hand side. Project funding requirements flow from the cost baseline, as we've just seen. We want to make sure there's enough money flowing at the right time, the work continues smoothly, and is not halted. If we take a look at this, this is a diagram from a project managed by Forsberg, where basically committed against spent, you get something like the cost baseline being laid out here, and then the funding requirements that we need for each individual phase to go to the next phase, and then the actual expected cost flow coming down here at the bottom.